Hey guys, Jason here with a DM discussion video. The idea of this video was suggested by Alex Vin from the German Duel Masters community, so I'd like to give him a special thanks and shout out for that. Truth be told, the topic of deck size is one I've spent a lot of time thinking about, so it's about time I did this one. Now let me delve into why players may want to run 40 cards and why they may not in the Duel Masters TCG. Let's get the most obvious argument out of the way first. A lean deck allows you to maximize the odds of hitting your cards at their right timings. Therefore, your deck will run according to curve more consistently, and the win condition will be much easier to achieve. This is to say that every extra card after the 40th is just fat that can be trimmed. Any potential drawbacks this may have can be addressed by better deck construction and optimal play. When it comes to decks with inherently simple strategies, I'd say this is for sure the way to go. These decks tend to want to follow a specific routine every game, and there is generally little deviation in what they want to do across different matchups. True aggro decks are a perfect example of this. A Fire Nature Rush deck is going to want to flood the board with creatures and keep swinging until the opponent is dead. It hardly matters if they're playing against Control, Mid-Range, or even another Rush deck. The strategy hardly changes. In these situations, it doesn't make sense to introduce spice because it will just get in the way of what the deck wants to do. When it comes to decks with more complex strategies, however, the decision to me isn't quite as clear. Lowering counts of certain cards or ignoring them completely to adhere to the minimum could prove problematic because it makes an inherently flexible playstyle a lot more restrictive. One of the reasons I enjoy control decks is because they tend to have relatively non-linear playstyles. The win can be achieved in a variety of ways, such as through your big boss, building a board of weenies, or even by deck out. Since the control playstyle is characterized by flexibility and being able to deal with many situations, it's difficult to reconcile how one is meant to achieve that with the fewer options a smaller deck size brings. Unlike true aggro decks, control decks do not have a one-size-fits-all optimal play that applies to every matchup. For example, in contrast to Fire Nature Rush, Rub Control's turn 3 play can often depend on what the opposing deck is. Against another control deck, Energy Stream is the more sensible play as hand is more valuable than field advantage at that point in the game. But against any sort of aggressive deck, Aquahulkus's ability to police the field is appreciated more. While neither is strictly a bad play, we enter territory where a split count from adhering to 40 cards may compromise the deck's ability to fully take advantage of either card. I also think it's worth pointing out that thicker control decks are able to better abuse rescue cards. Cards like Thrash Crawler, Corpse Charger, and Crystal Memory allow the player better access to their techs while also maintaining higher utility than the techs themselves. As a result, some might prefer running higher counts to have their cake and eat it too, so to speak. Because more complex decks can benefit by running higher counts of certain cards, I am not convinced that minimum deck size is necessarily the best way to play 100% of the time. So if I'm saying control decks can enjoy thicker builds, is that to say one should never build a control deck with 40 cards? Interestingly enough, not necessarily. Even though the way you play will vary depending on the matchup, there's no disputing minimum deck size still helps you hit specific cards at their desired timings, whether you're blockers, your draw, or destruction cards. The degree of optimality here will be rooted in the specific matchups you're trying to cover, and we can use this idea to highlight the inherent trade-off between consistency and flexibility. Consider these 4 situations. Deck A with 2 Searing Waves, 0 Blizzard of Spears, and 40 cards. Deck B with 0 Searing Wave, 2 Blizzard of Spears, and 40 cards. Deck C with 1 of each and 40 cards. And Deck D with 2 of each and over 40 cards. Deck A is best equipped to deal with the weenies because it runs the highest count of the fastest board clear and the smallest deck size. Deck B is most ready to defeat Petrova decks as Blizzard of Spears hits Petrova while Searing Wave does not. Deck C is theoretically able to deal with both aforementioned opposition, but will have to get a little lucky, and Deck D is theoretically able to adequately handle both situations, but will not run as hot as the others most of the time. This is meant to demonstrate that a more compact control deck is likely to better cover a specific matchup and can be considered the preferred approach in an environment where you can focus on what you want to beat. Conversely, thicker builds at the cost of some consistency can have better matchup spreads and can thus be best equipped when venturing into uncharted waters. The takeaway of all of this is that context matters. The type of deck you're running has a major influence, as does the format you're playing, which brings me to the case of live card games. Decks in live card games tend to run the minimum because they are constructed with the intention of beating the 4 or so best decks in the format. They can therefore focus and optimize their card counts to fulfill that purpose. On the other hand, the DMTCG, by virtue of being dead, tends to be more sandboxy in nature, or at least ours is. Creativity and variety are priorities, so the practice of optimizing to beat the best 4 decks may not be as applicable. There could be a lot of emphasis on being equipped to play a wider field, so the flexibility a larger size brings makes a difference for the better. I believe 40 cards makes perfect sense as long as the deck is straightforward in terms of what it wants to achieve, whether in gameplay or what to beat. The purpose of this video isn't to say my way is the right way, rather the purpose is to get you to think about why you are making the choices you're making. Naturally, building a fatter deck means you decrease the percentage of hitting each card, so the deck building process ultimately boils down to deciding on what matchups you want to cover, and then deciding on what compromises you can live with. There's no use in building an 80-card deck with answers to everything if you can never find them, nor is there in building a 40-card deck which can hardly deal with anything. The way I see it, it's not always about running the minimum deck size. It's about running the minimum number of cards that still allows you to achieve what you want, and that isn't always going to be the minimum deck size. But this is all just my opinion, surely one among many. Really, the way you should play should always be the way that lets you have the most fun. As usual, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.